1. You're live, Chair.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to this Performance, Governance and Audit Committee meeting on 24th of March 2022. My name is Councillor Jeanette Stilts and I am the chair of this committee. Members, the setup for the meeting has been designed to mitigate for COVID. Therefore, can I ask all present to work to the protocols agreed at Council on 2nd of September 2021 in the interests of member and officer safety. We are streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting you are giving your consent to being recorded. Members and officers, during each item please put your hand up to indicate if you wish to speak, and I will invite you to speak at the appropriate time. Please note that the YouTube live stream sound recording is dependent on the correct use of microphones. Therefore, can I ask that when invited to speak, you remember to turn your microphone on and turn it off when finished. Please reference a page or paragraph number when referring to the agenda papers and keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible. Members, in addition to the officers in the chamber, we have officers attending remotely. Finally, can I draw your attention to the notices on the agenda regarding the different levels within the chamber and advise that the fire exit is the door behind this tabletop. I'd also like to welcome Councillor Morgan, our new councillor, to this committee tonight.
Thank you.
Apologies for absence. Bernard, do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, we've received apologies for absence from Councillors Hull and Hurd, and Councillor Morgan is in attendance as a substitute for Councillor Hull, with Councillor Shaughnessy substituting for Councillor Hurd.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Item 3 on the agenda, it's recommended that the minutes held on the 10th of February 2022, found on pages 5 to 8, are approved as a true and accurate record. I so do move. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Keys. Are there any questions from any members on those minutes? Are you all happy to accept those minutes? Thank you. Item 4, declaration of interest, to disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other pecuniary interests or non-pecuniary interests relating to items of business on the agenda. Having regard to paragraph 6 to 8, inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they are also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware, should they need arise throughout the meeting. Do I have any declarations of interest? Councillor Stamp.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest as a member of Essex County Council on any agenda items pertaining to that organisation.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. A non-pecuniary as a member of Essex County Council, any matter that pertaining. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5 on the agenda is public participation. We have received a question from Mr. Fittock, and it has been answered by an email. So his question has been answered. Sorry, I've lost my place. Item 6 on the agenda. Yes, Councillor Stamp.
Thank you. Would you mind if I just ask, for public participation, would it not be advisable that, or if it's allowed in the Constitution, so I'll look to Councillor Boyce if it is, that it's actually read out and the answers read out, because sometimes the public questions are very informative, not only to the members of the public, but to members of this council. So I'm not sure if that's allowed or not allowed.
I did ask the officers if this question should be read out, because it is quite a long question with quite a long answer. I will go to Mr. Dobson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was my understanding that this was a question to the Chairman that was addressed to you as Chairman, that wasn't submitted as a formal public question for the committee. So it was answered outside of the the public participation protocols.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Boyce.
Chairman, that actually raises an issue that perhaps our constitution is silent on. Public participation has always meant the public being present. So do we need, in view of what Councillor Stamp has just suggested, do we need to look at the constitution to see if written questions would be allowed at some time in the future?
Mr. Dobson.
Yes, I think written questions could be allowed, and I think probably under the changes we made to the constitution could have been. It wasn't submitted in that manner as a public participation question. That was the point.
No, Chairman, I take Mr. Dodson's answer. I was just raising for the future, not for from the past. The only caveat, perhaps, to having questions, running it through my mind very quickly, is at the moment it's anybody that turns up 20 minutes before, and there's a length of time which these public questions are answered. If we open it up to written questions, they might become out of control. So it does need some thought.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp. Sorry.
Thank you. I see Councillor Fluke has got his hand up, but yeah, I'd just like to come back. The reason I raised it was because the chairman said public participation, actually on that point. So I wasn't being difficult. It was just, I think it's really important that our residents are heard, and especially with the subject matter that the email was about, I think it could be beneficial, like I said, to members as well as residents. Thank you. Mr.
Dobson.
I'd be happy to circulate the question and the answer that went out to all members in the committee so that they can see it.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wondered while Mr. Dodson's actually looking at this, whether or not we should look at Addendum 5 as well, because it doesn't, it's a little bit cumbersome the way it's written, and I think that we might need to just take a little look at that as well, because it does say on there that you can complete your question online, but it's a bit late after the agenda's been published, so perhaps you might like to look at the wording. Yeah.
Maybe that's something.
Yes.
No. Councillor Fleming, did you want to say something? Sorry. Okay. The question is there, and if people want to see it, I'm quite happy to have it circulated with the answer that would come from Miss Anne Shortland. Item 6 on the agenda is the update on the audit of the 2021 accounts, found on page 9 to 12. To consider the report from the Director of Resources. Mr. Leslie, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This report updates the committee on the progress of the audit. At the start of the year, just 40% of local government body audits had been completed nationally. As previously reported, this is due to a variety of factors, including a national staff shortage, COVID, and increased audit requirements. Section 5 of the report provides a recap of some of the challenges. Audit of the Council's accounts commenced again in January, with progress being made and no significant issues raised to date. Work is aimed to be completed in April. However, international and national issues could cause a further delay in signing of the accounts. The impact of the pension fund assets due to the Ukraine war is being considered by auditors. In addition, an accounting issue has been raised nationally around infrastructure assets, and changes to the accounting guidance are due to be issued in due course to rectify this, which auditors will need to wait for. Neither of these will impact on the Council's general fund position that has been reported in the accounts, however. Preparation for this year's accounts has not been delayed, and the auditors were able to conduct their interim audit in February as planned.
Thank you. Recommendation is that the report be considered. Do I have a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Fleming. Members, are there any questions that you would like to ask Mr. Leslie? Councillor Stamp.
Yes, thank you. If you could just refresh our memories, because I can't remember if it's 2019, maybe it was before your time or just when you started, when we got the new auditors in. So I'd look to Councillor Fluker and Councillor Boyce for some guidance on this as well. In the fact that the new auditors came in and those accounts were delayed because of a discrepancy under assets. So has that, because I think we negotiated prices as well, didn't we have to renegotiate the fees that were being paid to the auditor at the time, the new auditors? So why is it now suddenly a national issue when it was an issue to this council before? So if you could just explain to me what the changes are from central government now that's affecting us and affecting our audit. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. So changes around the accountancy guidance that we're talking about is not something from national government. It's actually done by the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy within their accounting guidance. It actually relates to a technical accounting issue with the guidance, which has been worded as such for a number of years. However, auditors have raised concerns this year around it and have met as a group of auditors to consider this technical issue. They have raised it with CIPFA, the body, who are then reviewing that in light of the auditors' comments, and they're going to make some changes so that the auditors are comfortable now to sign off the account. Largely, it will affect those highway authorities with those sort of infrastructure assets, the roads, etc. Around that. It does date back to a while ago when the valuation reserves were first created at the time, and the estimates around that, I believe, in the 90s around that. So it's just something that's been raised this year by external auditors, even though perhaps it was present for a vast number of years previously.
I can say that that's not just us, that's going to be every council that this will affect. Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, thank you. But mine was specifically what happened
Yeah.
a few years ago, because I just remember everybody renegotiating the price. It was a lot of money, and the reasons given at the council was because it was a new auditor, had to get used to different systems or something like that. I can't remember exactly. But I was just hoping that, we're not going to be charged a lot more money again because of delays, which are not, hopefully, this council's fault.
Thank you. Is there any other questions for Mr. Leslie? No. Are members happy to consider that report? Noted. Thank you. Item 7 on the agenda is the review of the corporate performance Q3, found on pages 13 to 40. Miss Hughes, would you like to present your report?
Good evening, members. This report covers the third quarter of 21 to 22, September to December 21, for performance against our corporate plan delivery. Section 3.3 of the covering report gives a broad update for each theme and highlights the position as of Q3, along with any areas of concern. You will see for all three themes, delivery is broadly on track as of Q3, but there are conditional elements. The detail behind this is then set out in Appendix A from page 19 onwards of your agenda pack. Some of the measures themselves or the way they are being delivered is under review, and text to give the explanation around this is available in each individual area. Section 3.4 of the report then draws out the specific indicators that sit at these theme levels that are at risk. Currently, one indicator has met this criteria, which is the 5-year housing land supply statement, which is sitting in place strategy. Page 22 of your agenda pack includes further detail about this particular measure. Any developments in performance since January will then be reflected in our next Q4 report. Members are invited to review and feedback on the corporate performance report and confirm assurance of effective performance management. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Hughes. So the recommendations is little 1 that members review the information as set out in this report and Appendix 1 with priority focus given to the strategic outcome level performance, and little 2 that members confirm that they are assured through this review that corporate performance is being managed effectively. Do I have a seconder for those recommendations? Councillor Fleming, thank you. Do I have any questions from Ms Hughes? Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Starting on page 13, at the very bottom of page 13, where it talks about place, it says there are some conditional elements identified that are in officer focus to enable some outcomes to continue to deliver on target. And that expression is used over and again, and I'm slightly struggling to understand what that means. I read it a few times and I think I got there, but as a general point, I, as a new member, I am still finding these documents are way harder to read than they need to be by the deadline. I'm not criticising the quality of the documents, it's just so hard to read, and I don't think they need to be. I ran one of tonight's reports through a Flesh Reading Ease software and it scored just 25, which means very difficult to read, best understood by university graduates. So I'm happy with the compliment, but they just don't need to be quite so difficult to read. And if somebody could just take 5 minutes to run each finished piece of work through that software, which is in Word, and maybe just take advice from Mr. Gates and change a few things, I think we'd all finish reading these documents before the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dobson, would you like to come back on that?
Yes, quite timely, really, because we are reviewing the format of the reports, and we will be looking to undertake a workshop with members, both to look at the format of how some of these reports look, but also how we present them, that we'll be looking to go through in April. So that'll be an opportunity for us to simplify them, hopefully, and make them more understandable, because that is the point of them.
And Councillor Stamp, I'll come back to you, Councillor Stevenson, Councillor.
If Councillor Stevenson wants a follow-up, I'll wait.
Okay. Was that a follow-up question, Councillor Stevens?
No, I've just got a list of questions, so
okay,
feel free.
Yeah, thank you. I actually did write on the top of that page what, and another one, what does it mean? Because I also struggled to understand some of it. Madam Chair, I don't know if it's the appropriate time, but I've just highlighted where it says fly tipping incidents. I've just put bulky items still suspended, cost to council, reputation, service delivery. I think because the previous meeting we had, I was told this was the one to review performance review, and correct me if I'm wrong because I'm new to this committee. But fly tipping comes up again, I think, further on when you look at all the lovely diagrams and graphs and everything that comes out of this. And it says here, total fly tip removals, £21,354. Now, is that further broken down? Is there any evidence where they are? Are they habitual offenders? Is it, you know, it just... No, don't write to me fly tipping incidents. It means nothing. So have we got the drilled down the information that can back that up, please?
I did ask that question on the...
Well, did you get an answer before I did, Madam Chair?
That's all right. I asked it when the agenda meeting, so there should be an answer. Mr. Holmes.
I can give you an overview. So obviously fly tipping can be from very minor to quite large, and our officers do investigate where they can find the evidence to take forward. Obviously people sometimes slip, they put identifiable materials in there, and in those cases we're able to take action. But we are working with our contractor to be work a little bit smarter about the way we deal with fly tips, to make sure we can capture as much data as we can, so we can improve that sort of ability to go back and chase. We talk about a global figure. Obviously, depending on what it is, depending on the material, it can obviously vastly difference between the cost of a small removal or asbestos, so it does vary. I haven't got sort of specific numbers of instances. We could break that down a little bit further and say, was that 10 or 15 or 100? So we could look at that for you. But we met with our street scene contractor a month or so ago, had a sort of general discussion how we might work better with our enforcement team to try and sort of follow through in more cases if we can. But yeah, that's the situation at the moment.
Councillor Stamp, you want to come back?
I do really, because I think we all know in our wards that we have an area where you always see it. It gets cleared, and then 6 days later, or 10 days later, it's actually something else is there. But I'd like the bulky item, our delivery that's still suspended. I mean, you only have to look. Where was it? Down the marshes. There was a settee the other day, and then you've got people all over Facebook saying, "Who can I get to remove my bed? How can I get my sofa rid of?" And then you find it on the back of a truck going down midnight down Creeksea Lane or somewhere, and you see it when you take your dog for a walk. So when are we as a council going to be able to resume that service? Because it was very handy that the council would come and pick it up and dispose of it. And is there a correlation between the evidence of fly tipping being greater now since the suspension of the bulky items? You might not be able to answer it because you maybe haven't got that level of scrutiny, but that's the sort of thing we need to be looking at, I think, if we have got the manpower, which I understand maybe we don't. Thank you.
Mr. Holmes?
Yes, I'll be happy to get a view from our team in terms of whether they did believe there is a correlation. The sort of things that are turning up could be as a result of not having the bulky waste collections. And as far as the bulky waste collections are, it's actually just a resourcing issue with the contractor. They are, as you probably know, are struggling. Drivers and loaders are dealing with COVID at the moment. So that was the service that took, we suspended that service to make sure we could focus on the normal collections. It's not getting any easier for the contractor, particularly at the moment with COVID. As you know, some of the green waste services have had to be suspended for the last 2 weeks, and that's simply because of driver shortages. So in the short term, I don't think we'll be able to reinstate that, but I will update that position with the contractor, and I'm happy to put a note back to the committee on that.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Mr. Boyce, Councillor Boyce, sorry.
I'm quite happy, as I've explained to you before, Chairman. I'm quite happy with that. In fact, you can call me anything as long as it's not late for breakfast. Now I've forgotten what I was going to say. Chairman, I seem to remember that at one time we had some involvement with the Environment Agency with CCTV cameras being put at some preferred dumping sites. Is that still happening? Have we got a covert capability?
I will go back to Mr. Holmes.
I don't believe we've got any current at the moment, and I think it has to be very specific about a site, a problem site where you can actually, where we get repeated drops. So I think in those instances it would happen, but I might ask Mr. Keeley just to add to that if he can.
Thank you. Yes, just to confirm, with some of the cases that I've come across here, the Environment Agency are involved when it hits certain topics and targets, and certain themes emerge and certain behaviours are noticed, and then they'll put in extra resources that can include the use of CCTV. But if it doesn't hit any of those triggers, then it's really just down to our own resourcing and what we can do to track down fly tippers in conjunction with the contractor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sort of surprised by that answer in some ways, because I think everybody knew what happened at Wabwell leisure plots, and I understand now that the absentee owners of the plots, the Environment Agency, are actually pursuing them for £21 million to clear the site up, even though the Environment Agency were acutely aware of who was tipping the waste in there. So what begs the question is, everybody knew what was going on, and then you're nodding. So why didn't they have any CCTV, and why has nobody been prosecuted for this?
That question the Environment Agency would have to answer, and I can certainly ask those questions from my contacts over there. But in terms of our own resources, yes, we've got certain types of intelligence that can include people who we suspect. In terms of our own resources, I don't believe we've got any CCTV equipment that we can deploy. It's a case of officers going down there and noticing things themselves with the resources and the tools that we've got.
Just come back. I'm even more confused now, because I was working with Mr. McShay, and he actually provided covert cameras for my ward and signs. So clearly something's happened since then if we're not actually doing that. and it is a problem. But Chairman, my question on this really, and I'm sure Mr. Gaylor will come back to me on that another day, but to really understand this, we need to understand what's been going on last year and how these figures are changing. You know, you've now got a situation in Malden where you can only go into Malden now with a van or a commercial vehicle if you book in advance. And the reason why we track these figures, or I asked these figures to be tracked, was when the civic community site in Burnham came from sort of 7 or 6 days a week down to 3, and we tracked it. And we did see a peak, but that seems to have gone down. But I think, you know, to understand these figures, we need to be able to compare it, you know, to perhaps last year to see where we are. But my other question actually wasn't anything to do with this, so I'll just wait until we go through the pack a bit. Yeah.
I'll get an answer to those resources. I'll come back to you.
Miss Hughes, there was a question in there from Councillor Fluker about the looking at the figures of last year compared to this year. Did you want to come back on that?
So we do look at fly tipping data as part of the operational reporting in the balance scorecard. And obviously we would report if there was exceptions on that. They haven't been highlighted in the data so far. So.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fluker, did you want to come back before? Thank you. Councillor Stevens, you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have a few more questions, please. At the top of page 14, it refers, and this is back to fly tipping, but a different aspect of it. It says, fly tipping incident data has gone through a data cleanse due to a change of data source for more accurate reporting. Does that mean we have a new database or somebody else is giving us the data, or what does that mean, please? Thank you.
Mr. Geller?
I don't know anything about that. I'll check that out and get back to you.
Councillor Stevens, carry on.
A bit further down that page 14, we've got section 3.4 where it says the following indicators have been annotated as at risk for Q3. So the first one there, place, it's talking about the 5-year housing land supply. Is the place risk here that the statement will be published late, or does it mean we're at risk of not having a 5-year supply? I mean, clearly the second is true, but is it also at risk of being late?
Mr. Dobson?
It relates directly to the supply itself.
Right.
It won't be late in reporting.
Okay, thank you. And the other two there, the prosperity and community risks, are both shown to be at risk as well, but it doesn't say what the risk is.
Mr. Dobson or Miss Hughes?
Sorry, which page regarding those?
Page 14, section 3.4, we've got place, prosperity and community strategies all showing as at risk, but there are no comments about the prosperity and community, so I'd like to understand what the risks are.
Sorry, the at risk relates to individual indicators within that, so there are none that are at risk within those areas, is what it's saying.
Okay, thank you. I wouldn't have read it like that. So it says at risk none, it means there is no risk. Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions? Councillor Stevens?
Sorry, I'm trying to keep up with my cursor here, or it's trying to keep up with me. The next one's page 19. I'm just scrolling down. Stop me if I've gone beyond the end of the report that I meant to be talking about. It's a sense thing again. Page 19, we've got a table there. Corporate Plan Reference 3, deliver the housing the district needs. I don't think I understand that. It says growing concerns of the 5-year housing land supply falling below 3 years is viewed as almost inevitable if significant progress isn't seen by end of year, along with the housing trajectory KPI also under review due to the progression of the LDP review now superseding something. I don't really understand what that's saying.
Mr. Dobson or Miss Hughes?
My understanding is it's because the review of the LDP had superseded the figures that were used in preparing that data.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to page 22, we've got a column on page 22 for target, but we're not seeing any actuals there. So taking the second row down as an example, the number of affordable homes delivered, it says it's on track and that we need to deliver 130 a year, but there's only about a dozen described there. So I think having, as well as the target, the actual numbers would be useful to prove that it's on track, really. Would that be possible, please?
Miss Hughes?
So for some of those measures, we only get annual data. The officers marked it as on track based on their knowledge of what's going on. And that's why they provide the summary sort of highlights and lowlights information. But actually the data wouldn't always update other than annually for some of those measures.
Councillor Stevens.
In that case, how are we able to give the Q3 figures there? Presumably, if we've got Q3 figures listed here, we must have Q1 and Q2 as well, I'd have thought.
Sorry, the Q3. So in the highlights, lowlights section here, the text that's given gives a summary of what's going on. So it's giving you the activity that's taken place in Q3. But it's not necessarily then showing you where we are against the target. We get that at the end of the year. Does that make sense?
Councillor Stevens.
Sorry, I'm perhaps really being a bit stupid, because I'd have thought if here we're saying that there have been 4 2-bedroomed houses and 4 3-bedroomed houses, etc., that adds up to about 10 or 12 houses or whatever in the third quarter. So if we've got those numbers for the third quarter, we must also have similar numbers, hopefully bigger numbers, for the second and first quarters, if we're on track to deliver 130 this year. I can't see how we're on track to deliver 130 if we've only delivered 12 in a quarter.
Mr. Dobson, did you want to come back?
Yes, my understanding is we have some housing delivery numbers and we have some completion numbers. The figures that are reported annually are through a survey and a collection of all of the data at the end of the year. So the information that's shown here isn't the full data set for the quarter. What they will do is collate all of the information at the end of the year when it is fully reported. So that's why there isn't a hard and fast progress towards this in Q1, 2 and 3, because it's incomplete data. They only have a complete data set at the end of the year when they do all of the surveys, all of the checks, and do the full report. So it's not fully reported quarterly, is my understanding.
Councillor Stevens,
thank you. I mean, it just seems strange that somebody can calculate, therefore, that it is on track, but can't show us that it is on track. I think that's what I'm seeing written here doesn't seem to illustrate the green on track status, so it just leaves me with a slightly worried feeling about that one.
Can I go to Councillor Stamp, who put her hand up, because I think she's got a question on this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I have. I think this is a really interesting point, especially when you, if members know I've raised a query under viewing scrutiny, because it concerns me about the tracking and why we've not been able to identify before we've got in the pickle we find ourselves in at the moment with the LDP. And I think Councillor Stevens has raised an excellent point, because we don't continually check and monitor. Annually is no good. We're not, if you've got to the end of the year and we're supposed to deliver 130 homes and we're only on 20, you've got no chance of actually the council adjusting or putting some measures in to reach that. And I've actually put similar points to what you've raised, Councillor Stevens, as well. But I'd like to, if you don't mind, because I've put on the one above where there is an at-risk. It says here, the 5-year land supply is still falling. At last quarter, there is a risk that it may slip under 3 years. By April, that's not as May anymore. It's going to happen unless the council approves a significant amount of housing, which will be delivered within 5 years. This is unlikely to happen, given many refusals of permissions that have already taken place. And I've just put what in big letters. Strategic sites, what? The information is not what I would call drilled down or enough that anybody can... It's all right producing a risk register if we can't do anything that is behind the risk, if that makes sense. Now, officers may have that information, but when we're sitting here to try and debate it and understand it, I personally feel that we should know more about it. And I'm sorry to give anybody a hard time, but I'd like to understand it as well, because that's why I've raised it at ONS, because I think it's really important that we know what on earth's going on. Thank you.
Mr. Dobson's dying to answer those questions.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll actually bring Anne out of Shoreland in a moment, but I wanted to go back to one of the things Councillor Stamp said around the delivery of houses, referring to the previous point from Councillor Stevens around the affordable houses. We've passed the housing delivery test for the last 4 years. The 5-year housing land supply and the delivery of housing over the current and last period are two separate things. So the point you made initially regarding the 5-year housing land supply and housing delivery, the two aren't necessarily interconnected, because we've delivered the land, we've delivered those houses, we've delivered the houses, but the problem is with the supply of the future housing for us to hit that test in future years. And that's what's been delayed by some of the lack, basically, the lack of supply is because there's not been enough houses approved through planning permissions. Some of those are delays to those that are in the current plan. For example, North Haybridge Garden Settlement, that was, when it came through initially as an allocated site, council rejected the application and there were subsequent hold-ups. So what it's done in effect is push all of that housing back from the schedule in which it should have come forward, which has meant we've now got a gap opening up where we've delivered on schedule. Those hold-ups in previous years have now led to the supply being pushed back, causing the dip in the housing supply. But I'll ask Anne out of Shoreland to come in as well, who can probably give some more planning detail on that item. Thank you.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
We only publish a 5-year supply once a year, or when we're asked by an inspector to produce a contemporaneous version of the 5-year supply. Because every time we publish and put all the details out there in the public realm, that has to go into the planning reports, and then it changes every single week. So I monitor the 5-year supply every week. So in effect, we could be publishing the supply every single week, and it would be different, and it varies by various points, depending on how many planning permissions you've granted and how many houses you've built. So councils normally only publish the details once a year, and we do that in April. We should do it in April anyway. Well, we will be doing it in April this year.
Councillor Stamp, did you want to come back?
Not really, no, not really, because all due respect, we know that, but that's not the point we were making. If you put in putting this down in a report, it needs to be accurate, or the figures need to be able to be backed up, and taken on board what the officers just said is that if they were only doing it once a year, yes, now we're monitoring it, but we're in a position now that we're struggling because it wasn't monitored. She's an excellent officer. We're not talking about that. We're talking about what's happened and got us into this state.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Dodson's screwing his face up because he doesn't totally agree with me. We never agree on this, so we better move on. To be fair, we don't agree on it, but I see it from a different point of view, and residents also see it from the point of view. Don't produce a risk register like this if you haven't got the information to back it up. That's all I'm saying. The officers might have it, but we don't know it. I bet every one of us around here is a little bit confused by it. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have any more questions, Councillor Stevens?
I do, please. But you'll be glad to know that we can skip down to page 28 now, please. the table there with the top row, which is business satisfaction with Malden District Council services via a survey. Am I understanding this right? Were we only wanting 30% of businesses to be satisfied with our services? Is that, somebody please tell me I've misunderstood that. Thank you.
Mr. Dobson? Miss Hughes?
Yeah, so that was the target, and that was based on an improvement on the previous year. Where we didn't receive particularly high feedback, so that's why that's the target. Obviously, as Mr. Dodson mentioned, we will be doing a workshop to re-look at when we reset these performance reports, and part of the reset of the performance report is reviewing the targets that we set, the same as what we did at the start of this year. So that would be the perfect opportunity to, re-look at that target and think about whether we want to be more ambitious next year.
Thank you. Councillor Stevens.
I think that's just one more on this section. Page 36, please. It talks about the number of schools supported by Malden District Council's Year 6 transition template. I'd appreciate some help in understanding this one. It says it's on track, but also that there have been no further developments with the template. Does that mean no children? I think what I'm getting to is, does this mean that no children have been helped, please?
I think I've asked this question before, and I think that this is because of the COVID and the fact that the schools were closed. Mr. Dobson,
Yes, it was because those were delivered as face-to-face projects previously, and they couldn't be delivered because of COVID. So the activity didn't happen.
And so will it happen? I mean, we've still got quite a bit of, obviously the school year and our year are different to each other. Is there still room for it to happen? Please, thank you.
I'll have to check on that detail.
Thank you. Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'd just like to ask Mr. Dodson a couple of questions. First one is page 20, the air quality management. I just wanted an update on that. It says target to AQMA action plan timetable. So I know that I'm a member of that working group and it hasn't met for some time. I just wanted an update on exactly where the hold-up was. I seem to remember there was a transport plan, and just wondered whether that was moving along. Thank you.
I'll hand to Mr. Geller.
Thank you. Yes, you're correct. Last time we met, and it was a long time ago, there was a request for a destination survey to be done. Where we are aware that the destination survey has been completed. We're just waiting for it to be handed across to us so we can double check it. And then we can see how we reconvene the meeting and how we move forward again. One of the other things as well with the air quality action plan, there was a number of smaller targets that we were hoping to achieve. And that's dependent on some grant funding, which we weren't successful for last financial year. We're actually putting together a bid for this financial year. We've brought in some help to try and get that bid together. So that should hopefully get everything back on track.
Councillor Fleming.
Excellent, thank you. And my other question was on page 22, the, where is it? Sorry. Monitor of all Section 106 agreements and publish in the infrastructure delivery statement, which I think we've done. We did at the end of the year, I think. Yeah. I was just wanted to ask whether all ward members or division members could be given a list of the Section 106 agreements for the sort of strategic sites, because I know the strategic sites, they were all passed before our time. So I mean, it's certainly from my perspective, I would quite like to know exactly what is in the agreements for South Malden Garden Suburb, for example. And I wondered whether, Mr. Dodson, that would be possible. Thank you.
Yes, that should be possible. We have a full list of all of the projects that can be broken down and forwarded to all members. Yeah.
Would it be possible to have that by Monday, Mr. Dodson?
I will need to hand over to Mrs. Altoff-Shawlett to ask that question.
I need it particularly for a meeting on Tuesday. Thank you.
When do you want it by Monday? Because after I log off, I won't be logging back on until Monday morning.
By the end of the day, thank you, Anne.
Yeah, South Malden, is that just the South Malden one you want?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'll
Thank
send
you.
that to you. I'll
Thank
do that,
you.
yeah.
Right, is there any other question? Councillor Fluker.
Thank you. I mean, there was a time when that information on 106 agreements was reported to one of the committees. It still is, I'm told. Yeah. So I would have thought you'd be able to track it through that. Anyway, clearly nobody wants to talk about what I want to talk about because you've skipped over it all. So, but I'd just like to drill in and to page 21 and deliver a super fast broadband. I mean, what this is saying is that our target is to roll out broadband to or offer the opportunity of broadband to every single dwelling in this district, apart from 300. That's impossible. You cannot deliver 99% coverage. And the way this is written, you know, I can understand if it was 99% of what was being offered by Openreach, but that's not what this is saying. So, you know, is this really saying now that we can get within 300 dwellings in the district? I mean, there was a time when you could see who owned the risk, and it's quite then easy to communicate with the officer to ask the question in advance of the meeting through Fresh Service. Not even a flicker from the directors then when I mentioned Fresh Service. But yeah, I mean, yeah, if we're going to be able to achieve this by the end of Q4, I mean, I'm well impressed. But I can tell you straight away, there's over 300 houses in Ashford and Dengie and on the marshes that you won't be able to reach. And I can see my friend from Burnham nodding over there. So I think we need to be careful with some of these targets.
Mr. Dodson.
Yes, we can get clarification of that target. Obviously, the figure is for coverage, not take up. So it is the ability for people to have it. And I understand that the latest scheme that they're introducing, there are other ways other than the Openreach fibre to cabinet through which are now eligible for the rollout of the scheme. But I seek clarification to be able to answer that in detail.
If you could email that to the members of this committee so that everybody's got that answer, please. Members, if there's no other questions, we will go back to the recommendations. That was little 1, members review the information as set out in this report and Appendix 1, with priority focus given to the strategic outcome level performance, and little 2, that members confirm they are assured through this review that corporate performance is being managed effectively. Is members in agreement of that? Thank you. We move on to agenda item 8, which is the review of corporate risk, Q3, page 41 to 52. Miss Hughes, would you like to present the report?
So this report again covers the third quarter of 21 to 22, which is September to December 21, and the corporate risks. Appendix 1, found on pages 43 to 51 of your agenda pack, gives the full table of the corporate risk register as at the end of December 21. Section 3.1.1 of the covering report shows you where the risks have changed direction since Q2. Risk R13, failure to manage the impact of organisational change, is recommended for closure as it related specifically to transformation work and is now replaced with a specific new risk, R31, resources and operating staffing structure is not sufficient for resilience. R14, unable to recruit and retain specialist staff, has increased in score. And R10, failure to develop jobs for the population, and R3, failure to target services and influence partners on the housing needs of ageing population, have both seen a decrease in likelihood. Section 3.1.2 also cover emerging risks. These are areas where we think the score could increase in the next quarter based on the information we have at the time. Members are asked to review the risk register update and confirm assurance through the update that corporate risk is being monitored effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Hughes. So the recommendations are: little 1, that the members review the corporate risk register in Appendix 1 and approve, comment and feedback for consideration. Little 2, that members are assured through this review that corporate risk is being managed effectively. And little 3, that members challenge risk where the committee feels that the council's corporate goals may not be achieved. Do I have a seconder for those recommendations? Councillor Fleming. Is there any questions for the officers? Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at page 42. I've just heard the explanation of emerging risks, because I was a bit surprised to see COVID on there as emerging, as though we'd not kind of heard of it before. So I wonder if that title, emerging risks, could be slightly modified, because it doesn't really reflect increasing risks, I think might be a better expression. And looking at this, it says that one of the risks is that we might be unable to recruit and retain staff, i.e. planners. Do I take that i.e. to mean that this is only a problem in the planning department, or are there problems in other teams as well, please? Thank you.
Mr Dobson had his light on, but he's turned it off.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to ask around the answer around the emerging risk. It was an emerging risk regarding COVID, because this was at the end of quarter 3 that the report was prepared, at the time that we had Omicron emerging, and that we were expecting there to be, or there was a risk that there would be a significant impact on services at the time. So whilst it is worded that it was linked to COVID, it was a specific emerging or growing risk at the time. But I take the point that it could be increasing risk equally as emerging.
And the second part of your question, Mr Holmes.
Thank you, Chairman. No, that was just an illustration, i.e. planners. We could say specialists, and that could include professional officers such as housing, environmental health, as well as planning, particularly planning. And there's always been a national issue with the shortage of planners, frankly, and it's been the same for a number of years. But I think across the services, we're finding it increasingly difficult to attract those specialists to the council for the various roles, and we are carrying vacancies as a result.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's just worth dwelling on that a little bit. Again, coming back to whether this is an emerging or an increasing risk, we haven't had planning enforcement for at least a year, so I don't really understand how this is emerging or just increasing now, because it's been there all the time, and we really don't seem to be. I can't see that we're doing anything about it. So we report it, but I suppose I'm looking for some action around it, but if the staff aren't there, I don't know what we can do. But it worries me that it's just appearing as an emerging risk when it's been there all year. Thank you.
Okay. Mr Holmes.
I think probably, yes, perhaps increasing risk then might be more appropriate. You're right, there's always been a background in there. I'd like to invite perhaps Hannah Wheatley, my specialist service manager now, to perhaps illustrate some of the things that she's doing. Believe you me, we're not sitting back doing nothing, and we're working very, very hard to actually recruit people to the authority. But I think Hannah might be able to furnish you a little bit of a background on that.
Yes, I'm happy to do that. Good evening, members. Where we do have vacancies, we try to look at other options for covering those vacancies by offering overtime to existing staff, although generally their workloads limit the amount of overtime they can complete. We do also go to agencies to try and get agency cover, but that is a very, very expensive option. For 3 months of agency cover, you're typically looking at about 8 months of permanent resource. So that is a last resort. In terms of training and development, we are looking at a pipeline to try and bring our more junior members of the team upwards, because it does seem to be the more experienced professionals where we have that challenge in terms of recruiting them. They tend to be attracted to the private sector. There aren't many people going into some of these very niche specialisms, so it certainly is an increasing risk.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you need to come back on that one? Councillor Stevens?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Boyce, you put your hand up. Then I'll nearly come Mr. again. Yes, sorry.
I can't quote page or number. No, I won't. But as a general question, where in the risk register is the potential of increased homelessness sitting?
Thank you. Mr. Geller?
I'm afraid I don't have an answer for where in the risk register that sits. I'll have to check on that part, but it is something that, you know, we do monitor and we do report on. There's national reporting guidelines for that. Is there a specific query about the homelessness data you want to try and tease out or drill into?
Well, where we are with rough sleepers, for instance, as a simple thing. I mean, reports say that there's an increase in the Malden district.
Okay, we do have that data. I can get that sent across to you. There is a couple of specific cases that I'm aware of that we're looking at. And if you want details for those cases, I can arrange for those to be sent across.
I just thought it would be a corporate risk. So if the question is out of kilter with what we're on at the moment, I apologise, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Geller, if you do send out that information, can you make sure you include all the committee so that everyone's aware of the answers? Councillor Fluker, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I did indeed. Thank you. A couple of things really, because it's all very well having a commentary against the risks, but we need to understand what the mitigations are, and I think that's what Councillor Stevens was alluding to. But risks 14 and 31, you know, I would have liked to, you know, you've identified the risks, and they're serious risks. You haven't really sort of come up with how you're going to mitigate this other than identify the problems. But I mean, I would have liked to have seen a narrative in there based on what Miss Wheatley just said. You know, the comparison between hiring temporary staff against full-time staff and the cost, and that's principally why we're not doing it, as a matter of course. And also, I'd expect to see something in there about shared servicing and outsourcing. Even if we can't do it, it means that we've identified it. But my other point was under risk 5. I'd like to hear an update from whoever's handling this risk 5 regarding Southminster Medical Centre, a current update. And as far as risk 5 is concerned, since when have we been the Highway Authority? Because it appears that we seem to be applying for funding from the Treasury for the South Morden Relief Road, when we all know that the reason why there's a shortfall is because Essex County Council, in their capacity, the Highways Authority, completely underestimated the cost of the road. And that is absolutely critical to delivering that site. So I'm sort of quite surprised to read that in there. What should be written in there is that we should be telling Essex County Council to deliver the relief road. They got the figure wrong. It's not our problem. You know, the contractors probably laughed all the way to the bank on this one. And, you know, we've had the story they didn't do a topographical survey, did a desktop survey, and that's why they didn't understand how the road went up in, you know, we've had a big discussion about this in the past. But why are we applying for this grant and not Essex County Council? And the update on the medical centre, I'd love to hear.
Thank you. Mr. Holmes, do you want to?
Chairman, I can do the first part, and then I'll hand to Mr. Dodson for the medical centre. So in terms of your observations around the mitigations, I'm sure when we do that review of the formatting, then Ms. Hughes will be picking that up. But again, like to reassure members, issues such as shared services, talking to other local authorities are happening right now. So we are looking to mitigate in a number of ways. Obviously, recruiting our team in is probably, you know, always on the list, but actually we are looking at neighbouring authorities to see where they may have extra resources. We already have some shared service arrangements. We have them in licensing, we have them around emergency planning, we have them in community safety. So there are ways that we're working quite successfully. There are other areas where, such as planners, environmental health, for instance, we're exploring those options. So all things are on the table, and we continue to do that. So I think when we come to look at the format of the reports going forward, we could talk about some of the mitigations as well in the report for you. And I'll hand over to Mr. Dodson for the other part.
Thank you. Southminster Health Centre, I believe, is awaiting the full business case within the NHS, and we ask this monthly. My latest understanding is that they're in the midst of doing that business case, and as soon as it's completed, they'll be submitting the full planning application. And I think I've reported that to committee previously, and I've not had an update on the exact date of that, when it will come through, but it will go through their full business case planning process, which is what they're preparing at the moment. In terms of the South Maldon Relief Road, to some extent it's correct, but the county council highways would have put forward the proposed costs of that were then agreed within the inspection in public of the LDP, so would have been embedded since that time. There is a potential shortfall, and we've been working hard with Essex Highways, and I think us demanding they deliver it isn't necessarily going to make it be delivered. We're working with them to ensure that the funding, that the design work is done and the funding is found, and that they're looking to do that work on the design to try and drive down the costs, and also to look at where additional funding can be attracted from. And we're also working with the NHS around the potential for the site and whether there's any further opportunities for contributions towards that. So we're working with the landowners, the highways, and everyone involved basically to see how we can help remove the barriers to that road, to make sure that both the road as infrastructure and any associated development that will unlock can come forward as quickly as possible.
Let me come back. So, Southminster Medical Centre, you didn't fall through the trapdoor, and I'm really pleased that you're doing as much behind the scenes on that as I am, because I've been talking to Mr. Gillam regularly about this, and I know the developer, or I know the landowner, and it really does look as though that's going ahead well, so that's good. But both directors have said tonight, Chairman, that we are under a huge amount of pressure at the moment. We've got staff vacancies, yet we appear to be doing the work of Essex County Council in delivering a road. I know how important that road is to us, but we do have to prioritise things, and you sort of alluded to it. I mean, there was a mistake made here, and it looks as though us as a council, who we have to accept as a snapshot, we're totally under-resourced at the moment, establishment-wise, and we're doing the work for Essex County Council. I don't want to sound spoilt, but it sounds terribly unfair.
If I can come back on that, Chairman, I think this is an area where there is considerable effort going in that potentially should have been an issue that was resolved previously. The reason, despite our resource challenges, that we're putting so much effort into it is because we need to bring forward that infrastructure for the residents of the district, and that there's a knock-on effect between that South Maldon Relief Road being delivered and subsequently the Maldon Health Hub. And whilst we do have, I take on board that it's a challenge for us with our existing resources, it's such an important priority that we are making sure, despite those resources, we're having those discussions. And really, it's only through partnership working, rather than taking going into a conflict around delivering that I think will be most successful, which is why it's the approach that we've taken in working with our partners to resolve those issues, however they came about in the past.
Right. We've got the same position in my ward with David Fisher Way. We've got the Southminster West Relief Road not opened because of the shortcomings of Essex County Council, and I just hope that the two county members that are in the chamber this evening take this back to county, and hopefully come back to this committee to say what's going to happen. I don't doubt they have. But then that I'd like to think maybe I'll give way to you and you can tell me what's happening.
I was going to say, Councillor Stout has kept on indicating she wants to speak.
Not breaching any confidence, but I'm actually going to back up Paul here. in the fact that when I was the leader, we did meet with the leader of Essex County Council, and we had a confidential meeting in there, and the Essex Relief Road was discussed at great length. And I actually commend Mr Dodson. I understand we've got resource issues, and some of that has come from the transformation because of all the changes, and some of it's come because we can't attract staff. And one of the things I wanted to say, and I'm going to combine these together with what Councillor Fluke has asked me as well, is are we actually paying enough? Have we looked at what the packages we're offering to try and get planners? Yeah, you can come back to me in a minute. I can see you're champing at me at the bit. Hang on a minute. You've had your say. So I'd actually like to back up Mr Dodson. There's two separate issues here. And I also have pulled this council about why the money wasn't put in there, because we knew the cost of that relief road was going to go, to be honest, off the scale. And I cannot believe that that wasn't put in there for whatever reason, however many years ago that Section 106 was agreed. And I'm sure the division member, it's you, is it you, Jane? Who is, it's not Councillor Mark, I've forgotten his name, Durham. So, you know, I think as ward members and division members, we have been doing it. And I'll give you an example. Even tonight, okay, I've had to write to the cabinet member for highways because they don't think the road, the Old Thorn Road, is bad enough, that's covered in potholes and drains that have collapsed, to be repaired. So if we're fighting against things like that, if this council doesn't work hard to try and get Essex County Council to move to build this relief road, we're going to become a car park. You can just say we're going to be like the M25, the Dengie. And I'm not being flippant because that's usually down to you. You crack the jokes. But that is the way that is where we are. Well, you do. That is where we are at the moment. And you can rest assured, Councillor Fluker and everybody else, that the divisional members for Essex County Council are working very, very hard indeed.
I'm going to go to Councillor Fleming because she also had a question. So.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to ask Mr Dodson if he could just give an update, a written update to the committee about the South Malden Relief Road. Just a brief synopsis of where we are as you see it from Malden District Council, the funding gap, how much that is exactly, and some ways forward. Thank you.
I mean, based on that, Chairman, I think it would be useful for this committee to be able to put some of these questions to Essex County Council direct. This is a performance issue. It's a non-delivery of a very important piece of infrastructure. And Chairman, I would propose that an officer from Essex County Council Highways is invited to this committee. We've done this before, and it'll be interested to see, you know, the interaction between the division. We're lucky enough to have the county members here as well, and it'll give us the opportunity to ask them some questions. I think the public need to know the answer to these questions.
Okay, thank you.
So I've made a proposal.
Do I have a seconder for that proposal?
I'll support Councillor Fluker because it is right, and I know you don't watch the Essex County Council full council meetings, but you'll most probably hear when some of us actually raise questions, and it's generally always about highways, and it has, like I've said, rest assured we have discussed it with the leader about delivery of that relief road, and we are doing everything we can, or we were when I was the leader, and I'm sure that the current leader is doing the same, and so is Mr Dodson, because he said how important it is. And rest assured, just because you haven't had an update doesn't mean to say it's not going on behind the scenes. I won't say behind closed doors because you don't like that, because open and transparency, but you know exactly what I mean when I say that, because you were the leader and you had conversations that couldn't be repeated.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. Is everybody happy with that proposal? Yeah, lovely, thank you. Mr Dodson, can we put that to Essex County Council and invite them to this meeting or to the next meeting? Thank you.
Can I suggest that we actually ask somebody with the authority who can make and answer those questions, not a member of Essex Highways, but somebody who can actually make the decisions or come to this council with an update, because otherwise it's a waste of time.
Thank you.
I think Chairman Fleming come back. I mean, Mr Dodson must be dealing with the decision maker or as close to it, so I think we'll leave it up to Mr Dodson.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mr Dobson, if you can organise that for us, that'd be very nice. Is there any other questions, Councillor Fleming? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go to Mr. Holmes. I understand we've recruited 2 new enforcement officers, is that correct? And I just wondered when they were going to start. And then I had a question for Hannah Wheatley as well. Thank you.
Hannah will be able to answer both those questions. You're absolutely right. We have made the offers and she'll be able to give you the detail.
Hello, yes. In terms of the enforcement officers, yes, we have appointed one into the level 2 specialist role and also the caseworker role. We're just going through the onboarding process. So I am hopeful that the level 2 specialist will be joining us on the 1st of April. I'm not too sure in terms of the notice period for the caseworker role, but I'll be happy to provide an update in respect to their starting date or projected starting date.
Thank you. And again, if you can send that out to all members of the committee, Hannah, that'd be lovely.
Thank you, Hannah. I just wanted to ask, Hannah, when you advertise for staff, where do you put place of work? Is it in Malden or do you leave that sort of looser so that you could recruit people nationally and they could work digitally? Thank you.
Yes, no, that's a good question. We did update the job adverts prior to Christmas so that we explained that there is the opportunity to work in an agile way, but it does state that our office is based in Malden and that people can work from the office. We are going through a process at the moment looking at job roles and the extent to which they can be hybrid. But we've just recently gone out to advert for a senior role within the revenues and benefits team, and because we have been able to offer that as more of an agile working option, we've had some very, very strong candidates. So that is very encouraging in terms of the fact that by being able to offer that as an option, we are attracting good candidates from across the UK.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you.
Mr. Holmes, you've...
And perhaps just to illustrate the point we were talking about, sort of vacancies, obviously members, we took a request for extra funding to you back in the summer for those enforcement roles. It's taken this long to find the right candidates. And that's certainly not been for the want of trying. As I say, we've moved the goalposts several times to achieve that, and I'm very pleased now we have. So I think that perhaps just demonstrates in certain areas of the council we do have resource issues, and I know a number of members are concerned about enforcement. We're still struggling to build that team up. So that's the sort of the backstory. But you know, it's an improving situation, and we certainly will be making some traction. But that just gives you a sort of an idea of the world we live in trying to recruit and keep staff at the council.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've also got to realise that the recent reputation of this council may have added to why certain staff maybe don't want to come and work with us or for us. I think that's unfortunate because the majority of members and officers, nearly all the officers, I can't think of any who aren't, are absolutely excellent, first class, and work so hard for this council. But my point is R11, failure to protect personal and commercially sensitive data. Would that risk, in your view, Mr. Dodson or Ms. Hughes, have changed slightly now, and would that be downgraded if that's not too politically insensitive?
This was a risk assessment at the end of Q3. There have been changes since then that would have significantly reduced the risk to the council, yes. I
think it's really important that we as members do make sure that we do follow and we don't breach confidentiality, because that has obviously gone into the Information Commissioner's offices. Do we get sanctions? Could I ask through you, Chair? Have we been sanctioned, or just a note or something goes on the web or on their page?
Mr. Nelson.
I understand to date we haven't been sanctioned, but we have had to report ourselves to the Data Commissioner when there have been breaches. But to date, those breaches haven't been significant enough that we've received a fine or censure, as far as I'm aware. But Mr. Leslie may have.
No, that's absolutely right. We reported the ICO, Information Commissioner, obviously will review it. Of course, they have the ability to fine people for breaches, but that has not happened to date.
Thank you. Councillor Shaughnessy.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was going to bring up this same point as Councillor Stamp just has, and I believe I read on page 54 that there is training for members on this. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. All right, members, are there any other questions? Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. On page 51, risk 1, actually, it says failure to safeguard children and vulnerable adults. I'm very pleased to see that the overall risk rating is reducing. we now only have a likelihood of 1, which is good. But given the importance of safeguarding, can I just seek assurance that this really definitely is now a likelihood of only 1? I'd like to know what are the outstanding contractor management and support improvements that are referred to, please. And where is the separate audit action that is mentioned here? Because I couldn't see it in here. Maybe I'm looking for the wrong thing. Thank you.
Mr. Geller.
Thank you. So in terms of the safeguarding meetings, yes, they're all taking place. They're functioning well. In terms of the list of contractors and their safeguarding requirements, that those checks are being done. It's just where we hold those centrally and so that they're all coordinated in one place. That work still needs to happen. And in terms of the other audit points, they're all contained. They're all being dealt with. They're all contained separately. So I'll have to go away and just check. When you say the other audit points,
so the very end of the commentary on that item says, however, this should have minimal bearing on risk and is contained within a separate audit action. And I just wondered where that is, please.
I think that when we had the audit report last meeting,
yes,
there was a risk around forms for safeguarding.
Yes, yeah. So, no, my apologies. Yes, the safeguarding audit did contain a list of recommendations. So they had additional points that we needed to hit. The main one was in relation to starting up the meetings again. The other one was regarding the contractors list, which I referenced. And then the other one was to do with forms and access to forms. Forms and access to forms has been sorted out. We had paper copies. We still have those. There's also an electronic version that staff and others can access to input data on and to raise risks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that all, Councillor Steens?
Thank you. Yes, I'm on page 57. Have I gone too far? Or are we
Yeah, you've gone on to the balance scorecard. Okay. Right. Thank you, members. We had the recommendations. Little 1, that members review the corporate risk register in Appendix 1 and provide comment and feedback for consideration, which I think you've all done. Little 2, the members are assured through this review that corporate risk is being managed effectively. And little 3, the members challenge where the committee feels that the council's corporate goals may not be achieved. Are you all happy to agree those recommendations? Councillor Stamp.
Chairman, don't we have Councillor Fluker's addition on here?
Oh yes, sorry. Yes, your additional proposal, if you would like to just go through that again. Okay, and that was seconded. Yeah, and that was seconded by Councillor Stamp, and that was agreed. Do you have that, Berna?
Yes, Chairman, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item 9 on the agenda, the balanced scorecard exceptions report, pages 53 to 56. Miss Hughes, would you like to present that report?
Yes. So the report details areas of operational performance where we are seeing exceptions, which covers both under and over performance. Internally, the leadership team monitor this data and discuss it monthly to help address performance issues in real time where possible. And a 6-monthly report is then provided to the committee to show exceptions. This report covers July to December 2021. Section 3.5 of the report provides a table of measures that are underperforming with an explanation of action that is taking place to address each one. 3.5.1 also highlights an emerging trend that we're seeing, but where the data is currently within tolerance. This is around an increase in housing demand. The team are currently managing this operationally, but we just wanted to flag it to the committee. Section 3.6 of the report also then provides a table of measures that are overperforming. Members are invited to review and comment on the report and confirm assurance that operational performance is being managed effectively. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Hughes. So recommendations, little 1, that the committee review and comment on the exceptions to service reporting provided in the report, and little 2, that members confirm they are assured through this review operational performance is being managed effectively. Can I have a seconder for those recommendations? Councillor Fleming, thank you. Is there any questions? Councillor Stevens.
Thank you, Chair. Page 57, summary of key issues where we've got some accidents and a near miss. This one with the dog, a member of staff.
That's the next.
Oh, sorry.
That's the next one. You're still too early.
Sorry. Sorry. I'll keep quiet again.
We are on pages. I just lost it. yeah, 53 to 56. So, is there any questions on those pages? No? Okay, thank you. So, are you all happy to accept those recommendations? Thank you. Item 10 on the agenda is the review of health and safety, quarter 3, pages 57 to 72. Mr. Holmes, this is your...
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd like to just briefly go through the report and then we'll be happy with any questions. So you'll see there were 5 accidents and 1 near miss during this particular quarter. And as you see, the format has remains changed. So we now talk about the incident and the action and any detail that sits behind them. So they're all laid out for members, and obviously happy to answer any questions as we go through the report or at the end. The unacceptable behaviour incidents were also reported in the section 3.2 of the report. Section 3.3 of the report looks at the Health and Safety Action Plan, and you'll see that set out at Appendix 1. There are a number of activities that have happened within that report, and I'd also like to draw your attention to 3.4. We've now had a third party engaged to undertake fire risk assessments for the council, all of its buildings, including those that are leased out to third parties. And this work started at the end of last year and will complete during this year itself. The reports themselves are set out to check on all of the necessary requirements are in place, and will make any recommendations for improvements. We also will work with the tenants and the people occupying the buildings to bring those buildings to a satisfactory standard. So it's an important piece of work that's underway. We've also picked up health and safety risk assessment training, and we've now identified a number of managers also requiring that training, and that work is also scheduled for this year. All areas of the council are covered by this work, and obviously including specifically around our service delivery in parks and planning. Health and safety policy remains unchanged, but it's just been updated to reflect the new organisational structure, and that's set out for you in Appendix 2. The bulk of the report straddles Q3 and Q4 activity, and I think it's important that we talk about work that's happening now into Q4, and we'll update a little bit further on you at the end of Q4, but I thought it was important so you could see the work that's underway. And thanks to colleagues that are on the Teams call this night, and that's Sue Green, Hannah Wheatley and Farley Norman. This has really taken a great deal of a step forward really in taking these actions. So you'll see under 372 a number of activities that are underway. We've now set up an internal health and safety working group, and that's made up of officers from across the authority and who will monitor health and safety in the authority. We've set up a new information sharing system under SharePoint. It's a system that we have in the council, and that will be the reference point for all of our records going forward. And that brings together a number of areas that we're keeping separate records, so we will now get a single picture, which is much improved. We're also upgrading our arrangements about fire and emergency arrangements. We're looking at our own depots in Princes Road and making any relevant changes. In the same way, we're looking at our properties that are actually leased out. Health and safety inspections are also being undertaken across all areas of the council and all partners areas. So we mentioned that a little bit earlier, and we're also doing a lot of work around COSH. We're also picking up activities under the SMART objectives for staff to make sure they have health and safety included where relevant to their particular roles. We've also identified a reporting system for accidents and near misses. So you may well see more reports of near misses coming through, because we've now got a proper reporting system and actually training the staff on what a near miss is, and that you will see an increase in reports coming forward. That's a summary of what we've been doing between 3Q and Q4, but into Q4 we're also looking at a number of specific other actions, and they're detailed under 3.9 of the report. So we'll be happy to help with any questions tonight, members.
Thank you, Mr Holmes. Recommendations is little 1, that members consider the accident and incident statistics. Little 2, that members consider progress and help with the health and safety action plan. And little 3, that members consider additional health and safety improvements. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Fleming. Councillor Stevens, do you want to ask your question?
Thank you. Am I definitely at the right time?
You are.
Sorry. Yeah, so page 57, we've got these accidents and a near miss. The first accident listed there is that a housing officer was bitten by a dog whilst visiting a member of the public in their home. Well, first of all, I hope that the staff member concerned is fully recovered, because it must have been really very shocking. I don't feel the responsibility and onus lies entirely with the staff, though. So yes, we have an action that's sort of empowering staff to request for a dog to be secured. But the member of the public has a huge responsibility here. And I kind of get that we can't put their responsibility down as, oh, well, we've issued that responsibility. But we should have something here around writing to somebody or being able to... How do we almost contract with the person that they do secure their dog before one of our staff goes into their home? Yeah. Thank you.
Mr Geller, I can see your...
Thank you. Firstly, in relation to whether we can ask someone to secure a dog, yes, that's certainly something we can work into that. So my recollection about this particular case, though, was it was in relation to a housing visit to a vulnerable person. They had I think the dog was a small to medium-sized dog, got quite excited, and that resulted in a nip. When it comes to visiting officers, in terms of the forms so that they know when they're going to the property what they're going to expect, I'm pretty sure that form doesn't actually state whether a pet is present or not. So we can certainly work that in and try and prevent against this happening again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I've actually put in big letters, well done. I'm absolutely impressed with this. It's something that they've worked hard on. There's a new member of staff. I don't like really singling members of staff out, but Mr Holmes did mention somebody. There's a new member of the team, and he has worked very hard and keeps members informed, ward members, of things that are going on. And I think it's really good, because this is something I really pushed for, because I thought it really needed looking into quite seriously. And I'd like to say thank you and well done. And I think it's a document that's a live document that will keep evolving. So, you know, housing officer was bitten by a dog, yes. So it's really unfortunate that we all go into dogs and we think, you know, you're lovely, lovely, and we can get a little nip somewhere. So sometimes we're a little bit too friendly, maybe ourselves. But yeah, once again, I'd like to say well done to the team, for everybody who's worked hard on this. It's something we needed to do, and I think they've delivered it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Councillor Stevens.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Same table at the top of page 58, we've got this one with the chair that failed, and we've got an action that the chair was disposed of, and so was another chair, but not the chairman, of course. I just think, yeah, but we ought to be having a rolling look at our furniture. If there's chairs around that are falling apart, then another one will go next year. So can we have a further action in there to be looking ahead a bit and stopping this from happening before it does? Thank you.
I did ask these questions of Mr Holmes in the agenda meeting, so he should have an answer to that. Mr Holmes.
The short answer is yes. So, yes, you're absolutely right. We do need to do inspections on equipment. I've got to check whether the caretakers do a rolling inspection of chairs, whether there was a fracture or it was a simple break. I don't know, but you're absolutely right. So we'll capture an extra action to make sure there's a maintenance check on those.
Mr Holmes, can we also ask whether there was a misuse of the chair, i.e. was the person standing on the chair, or was because we seem to be of different opinions when we read that last time.
Indeed, I'm not sure of the circumstance that happened, but clearly Anderson happened and the chair clapped. So we need to understand why that happened. But yeah, we will check them in any case.
Thank you. Is there any other questions for Mr. Holmes? Mr. Fluke, Councillor Fluke.
So, I mean, this is quite interesting because the way I've read this happened in the reception area, which is currently being leased by National Health Service. Yeah. So one presumes that within the terms of that lease, we are responsible for all of the fixtures and fittings. Now, bearing in mind the amount of use that place has had, but I mean, what concerns me about this is if you read the report, typically it talks about health and safety and us all being responsible for it, and it talks about us being proactive rather than reactive. Now, some of you will remember when Councillor Richard Dewick collapsed through a chair in the training room and subsequently successfully sued this council. Now, our insurance company settled with him, and quite rightly so. Yeah. So I hope now that I've jogged Mr. Holmes's memory about that, we really will be proactive, and because these chairs are all a bit wobbly and what have you, and we live in a very litigious society, and we should learn from Councillor Dewick's bad luck, but nevertheless success.
I mean, I think we have learned, and I'll invite, if you may, Sue Green to make a comment around particularly this incident. I think she's got a bit more information, probably help with the bigger picture.
Okay. Miss Green.
Members. Yes, on this particular case, it wasn't a misuse. It was simply a chair that had a very small hairline fracture underneath, and it wasn't something that was visible. And after the incident happened, every single chair was then fully checked, and there was one other that was showing signs of potential issues, so that was removed and destroyed. And when we do have regular checks that are undertaken, just to reassure members of that. And there wasn't any misuse of it. It was just one of those things, unfortunately. I believe it's a solder that had cracked underneath one of the chairs, so not something that was very visible.
Thank you. Is there any other questions for Mr. Councillor Morgan?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm just wondering, are those members of staff who habitually use computer screens offered free eye tests?
Chairman, yes, as part of our package for staff, we do offer that. So sort of the display screens, all of those are sort of looked at through our sort of health and safety processes as well. So yes, we do offer those services.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, I think you'll remember because I asked if it was extended to members because I've struggled a lot with screens and it's not, is it?
No.
See? Right. Is there any other questions for Mr. Holmes? No. Members, are you happy to accept those recommendations? Thank you. Item 11 on the agenda is the annual governance statement action update Q3, pages 73 to 78. Miss Hughes, would you like to present?
So as part of the new annual governance statement format, we identify actions that are around continual improvement to our governance arrangements and best practice. The report found on page 73 of the agenda pack gives an update for the actions identified in the 2021 report. There's a summary table set out in section 3.5 of the report with officer commentary. Actions that have been highlighted in grey have previously been reported to this committee as completed, but in addition to this, there is a new action reported as closed and 2 which are ongoing. We are currently drafting the 21-22 annual governance statement, and any outstanding actions will then be reflected in this, as well as new actions around the latest best practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Recommendation that the committee reviews the annual governance statement table and updates below and challenges where necessary. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Are there any questions for the officers? Councillor Stamp.
Only one that I brought up before yesterday's meeting. Are we getting the owl equipment, Mr. Dodson? Is it called the owl, the roving owl eye or something? So when we have remote meetings, people can actually see, you know, the hybrid meetings rather than, you know, somebody's already messaged me. They can't see our lovely two councillors sitting on the end there today. Somebody said, "Were you here?" And I said I could hear them. Yeah, so are we upgrading our systems, please?
There's a camera sitting over there that isn't connected yet that will do exactly what you've just suggested. So yes.
Okay, lovely, thank you. And we will note that the camera's sitting over there. Is there any other questions? No, are members happy to accept those recommendations? Thank you. Item 12 on the agenda is any other item of business that the chairman of the committee decides is urgent. There are none. Therefore, I will close this meeting at 9:05. Thank you, members. Thank you for your contributions this evening. I now draw the meeting to a close.